Today's guest has built a framework, actually several frameworks, on how companies can adopt AI across their enterprise. One of their frameworks is similar to the 5 stages of grief, which I find really funny, if whether or not you're an optimist or pessimist when it comes to AI. But it's called the 5 stages of AI transformation. And this framework is very helpful for me to think about as an individual worker, how to think about AI and how to take this technology and make it work for you in your career rather than be fearful of it. We also talk about business leadership's attitudes towards AI and how they can bring a new way of doing things into the organization without completely disrupting operations and what that looks like to work within real times. And then finally, during the episode, we touch upon the future of AI and all of the innovations that are coming and what your tech stack will likely look not only, in the next 6 months, but the next few years as well. So can we see beyond that? Not exactly, but at least this will give you a helpful start to help navigate all this AI stuff. So with that, let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by Steve Cunningham. He's the co-founder of Simple Academy. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Now, am I mistaken, or are you coming to me from just down the road in San Antonio, Texas?
Just down the road, down good old 35.
Oh, yeah. That wouldn't be the path that I would take to get to you, I don't think. But either way, love San Antonio. I was just there last week. So nice to have a fellow Texan on. And before we dive into our big topic today, which is AI adoption across the business enterprise, I just wanted to first give our listeners a little bit of context about you, what you've been up to in your career, and what led you to start the Simple Academy.
So I always start off my story by saying that I was a lawyer for exactly one week, which is a true story for another day. I graduated law school, became a lawyer, 1 week left, joined family business, which at the time was a very small sign company. Out of that, I started a marketing agency, which I ran for 10 years. Out of that spawned an e-learning company called Read It For Me, which was book summaries of best-selling business and personal development books. And the short version of how we got to Simple Academy was about a year and a half ago, if I'm counting correctly, maybe even 2 years almost now, ChatGPT came out. And we realized very quickly that that set of tools was eventually going to put Read It For Me out of business, because we could very easily get a very good book summary with a couple of prompts, which has gotten even better over time. So we realized that at that point we would need to pivot and find a new lane for us to work in. So we were in education, so we kind of took a really deep dive into the tools and started teaching people what we were doing, which was ultimately using them inside of our e-learning business. Just one day decided to send out an email saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you like to learn? And started a product that turned into listening to what people wanted to learn about. And eventually we created what is now called Simple Academy. And we're helping entire organizations adopt AI, and more specifically, how to use these tools to do their jobs faster and easier so that they can be more productive. So for companies, we're helping them increase productivity so that they can increase profit. And for employees, we're helping them increase productivity so that they can become more promotable and increase their pay. And so here we are.
Here we are. And I can't imagine how much maybe attitudes towards adopting AI and the speed in which companies should adopt it, how the attitudes have changed now compared to, say, 1 year ago. So, can you speak to first the attitudes of business leaders in that regard? And then maybe we can talk about how the staff views it too.
Yeah, for the longest time, most business owners simply just didn't care. It was a nice tool. They probably played around with it and it made a nice poem for them or a joke or something. Maybe it wrote an email. And so ultimately what they were using it for were not very productive things. And so there was this dichotomy of, and I think we'll get into this concept of the AI tech stack for individuals. Most people were either using all of these other tools that were built on top of LLMs that would have workflows baked into them, but mostly not. And then if they were using the base model LLMs like ChatGPT and now Microsoft Copilot and Claude and Gemini and all the tools, they simply didn't know that they could use it for productive things. I don't know how else to put it. And so mostly they didn't adopt the tools. And what we were seeing inside of organizations was that some individuals would figure it out and they would start to use it productively. And they would almost have to use it on the sly because organizations were starting to clamp down on usage, and sometimes rightly so. But for the most part, the business owner, I think for the most part, business owners' attitudes towards it are starting to understand that it could be productive, but still mostly don't know how much it can actually increase the productivity of their employees. So we're still in the very early days when it comes to AI adoption wholesale at a company.
I see. And educating on here are the better use cases, right? Here are the things you want to gravitate towards and use first versus these other, yeah, random things. How about staff attitudes? So you mentioned that some people are using it on the fly because they don't really feel like leadership's on board. Is there also this attitude? So what I've heard is just I'm already busy enough. I can't wrap my head around how to adopt this because I'm overworked as it is. I'm fatigued. Don't tell me to go try this out. Have y'all run into this attitude as well?
Absolutely. We've seen the journey of thousands of people in the last couple of years, and we've figured out that there is this progression through these stages of what we would call AI transformation, both as an individual and as a company. And so, for an individual, it would usually start off with either indifference, so what, like I'm too busy or whatever, or active resistance, which is different, and usually because they're worried that their job is going to be replaced, sometimes rightly so. And then, so that's stage one, is like this indifference or resistance. And then stage two is that when somebody finally shows them how the AI can actually do a part of their job and make it faster and easier, and the output is actually good, then they move into the fear stage. So all of a sudden, like, and this is what happened to me, is what, if you're using AI, it's probably what happened to you. It just happens to everybody. Like there's this fear and it washes over you and you're like, I might not be as relevant anymore as I used to be in the past. Or the skill that I thought was the thing I'm going to hang my hat on for the rest of my career is now not as important. What am I going to do? And so it's kind of like the 5 stages of grief. So, but everybody has to go through it. And once you get to the other side and you start to realize that you only have two choices, it's either, and it's that cliche that most people have heard, your job's not going to get replaced by AI, but by somebody who's using AI. It's, most people kind of parrot that phrase without really internalizing it, but it's true. Somebody who can do your job faster and easier, which means they can do more things, is going to be more productive and thus more valuable to a company. So it's true. And so most people decide, okay, well, I guess I better start using this and learn how to do it. And then they go through the third stage, which is embarrassment. The first time you use the tool, and it does a piece of your work, and you're like, that's actually pretty good. There's this embarrassment when you turn it in to your boss or to your teammate and say, here you go. Where before it was relying on your expert knowledge. So you're embarrassed. And then when you realize the world didn't end because you used AI in your role, That turns into the fourth stage, which is productivity. And then the last stage is what we would call promotability. If you keep using AI over a long period of time and you find more and more ways to be more productive, you're adding more value to the company and you're just more promotable. So if you're wanting to progress in your career, this is probably the easiest cheat code that's ever going to come along in the entirety of your career. Like this probably won't happen again. And so it's kind of this time and place where if you get over that fear and the embarrassment, you can make a lot of progress real fast.
Right, because everyone's starting from similar stages, right, of learning this, trying to figure out how to apply it as the technology rapidly changes, and so it's a, like I said, kind of a levels the playing field to a certain extent, for sure. I appreciate those stages. That's very catchy and easy to follow. Um, as you went through them, you emphasized productivity is being part of this tipping point of how can you be more productive? How can you do more utilizing these tools? Tell me a little bit about other benefits besides productivity, or specifically, where does creativity and those types of things that marketers specifically care about, like the company's brand and being creative and edgy, and how does that fit into working with AI? What have you seen there in addition to just output?
Well, I think the the way we think about it is like if you're in a creative role, part of your like the way you are productive is you're creative. And so for us, it means the same thing. But we just know when you deconstruct a role, and it doesn't matter what it is, a marketing role, a sales role, a customer service role, it's really easy to most people to understand how some roles would get replaced with AI. And it's harder for them to grasp put their arms around it, like in creative roles, like how the AI can never do my job and be creative. But in reality, what we have found is that if you deconstruct a role into deliverables, which is what all knowledge work is. So we've got all of these different frameworks that we put together to help people kind of understand. And so we have this 5 levels of knowledge work framework, which starts with an objective at the top, which is usually like a quarterly goal that your organization will either set for you or that you're going to set in part as part of a strategic planning exercise. That gets broken down into projects, and every project is made up of deliverables, and then every deliverable is made up of a task, and then every task is made up of a set of actions. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a creative task or it's a stamping things on a manufacturing line. You can deconstruct every role down into those kind of elements. Mm-hmm. And when you start to build them back up again and you start at the bottom, utilizing AI at each step, you'll realize that, in fact, the AI is good at coming up with divergent ideas in creative ways to solve problems and so on. And so it ultimately, if you can think about it and deconstruct your role into those elements and then start to work your way back up the chain, you'll figure out productive ways. Now, it doesn't mean that the AI is useful in every single task and action, but that's part of the learning process, is to dig into it and assume that it is, go try it. And then actually one of the most valuable things you can do in the AI age is to know ahead of time or ahead of everybody else where it's good and where it's not, because it isn't good at everything. And that will also change over time. So if your ability to keep pushing the limits of what these tools can do is really a huge competitive advantage in your career, or whether you're an agency owner, you will simply just get a lot more done.
Okay, well, I appreciate that framework of breaking it down into those micro tasks and working your way back up. And so, are companies doing this one department at a time? Are they doing this company wide and setting time aside to have this big transformational change? I mean, how do you go about doing this without completely disrupting businesses usual, right? Because you still need to, get leads and make money and revenue and ship products or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. So the way that it typically gets rolled out in a company, like we find that we've got a framework for this. as well, just what we've seen. And it's actually different than what we had first anticipated. Like we thought you're going to just try to replace the roles that are likely candidates, like, make customer service much more effective. And but most organizations start with, like, the stage one is there has to be buy-in from the leaders. If there's no buy-in from the leaders, nothing happens at the organization level. So that's either the CEO or the COO, somebody who, one of those two roles, has to say, okay, we're gonna do this and let's figure it out. Then they'll typically do a pilot program, and we would have thought they would bring in some frontline employees, but they actually want to do it as a leadership team. So we'll work this as a leadership team first. If it goes well, we'll then roll it out across the organization. And then what we find is that they become more productive, and then that opens up a lot of strategic possibilities for how do you use the advantage you have now that you're more productive. And then that leads obviously to more profit. But in terms of, like, how do you get people away from their day-to-day work to spend time in this? Like, there is a difference between learning in the AI age, if you're doing it well, and learning in the pre-AI age. And I spent the last 10 years working in, like, the leadership development space, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, I'm too busy to go sit in the classroom. Like, I got things to do and results to create. But in the AI age, we've deconstructed everything that we do into these 1-hour classes. So everything happens within an hour. And for every class that we run, they actually do work while they're there. And the work is always some magnitude less time to get done in the class than it would be to actually do it manually before. So the dichotomy is, the more of these classes you go to, if they're constructed properly, the more productive you actually are. So it's actually more productive to be in class than it is to not be in class, which is a complete 180 to the way learning happened pre-AI. And so we find that people like that. They like to get more work done, and it becomes a carrot rather than a stick. So that ultimately has been, that's always been my struggle. Like, we want people to learn, and the resistance is always they're too busy. And in the old learning model would be, you'd have to go apply it after the class. There's, like, no way to actually apply it while you're there, and thus most people never get around to applying it. So it's this huge disconnect in the way learning happens, both in the, like, traditional education world and in corporate education. But now that you can actually do the work while you're there, it becomes way more useful for the company. So they're more productive every time they come, so they like it.
Got you. It reminds me of a hands-on workshop, right, where you're building something as you're learning. Certainly, I can relate to that pre-AI, if you will, and always appreciated that, because, right, you learn by doing, and it's more engaging anyway. So, okay. Another question for you. So we're going to need to unpack some of the what's coming things going on with AI. So I know, AI agents are coming, and that's really going to change what we're able to do with AI. So if a company, I guess, one, maybe you could speak to just how things are changing in the world of AI and how business should react. But I'm also wondering about timing, because it seems there's going to be even pre-agent and post-agent life. And then on top of that, you have tools like your CRMs and your ERPs that have AI that's baked into it. So talk to me, I guess, about technology stack and future changes and all of this jumbled stuff that we should think of when we're considering when to pull the trigger on enterprise scale adoption.
Yeah, so I think there's two steps to this question. So the first one is, okay, what's going to happen over time as these tools get better? And then the second one is, what does the tech stack look like for an individual as they're working in their role? So the AI role tech stack, let's call it. So I'll start with that one first, because that'll help think about the second one. So the first one is, like, what tools are people using in their roles? So what we have found, and I'll tell this through a story. One of the members in our community, she is the in-house counsel, chief legal officer of a biotech company. And she uses a base model LLM. She uses ChatGPT, but that could be Copilot or Claude or whatever. And then she also uses another tool that's called GC.ai, General Counsel.ai, which creates a workflow specifically for in-house general counsel that most people just wouldn't think to do in a base model LLM. Plus, there's also features in that tool that do not come standard with a base model LLM. And there's like security things that are very specific to the legal profession. So we've found, what we have found, and then to your point, the AI starts to get baked into all the other software tools that you're already using, like Microsoft and Excel and Word and all the other equivalents like that, project management tools. There's a set of tools that you're just going to use because you have always used them, and all of those companies are going to bring in AI to it. So there's three things. One is so moving forward, once this whole thing spreads throughout the entire workforce, every employee will have their base model LLM, which will probably be chosen for them by the company. They will have a set, one or two, maybe more of specific tools that help them do a workflow better. Most like marketing, I'm sure you've seen thousands of pitches for the difference. Those are all the important thing to understand is those are all built on top of the base model LLMs, and thus just creating a specific workflow. That would be important in a second. And then the third one is the AI gets built into all those tools, which for the most part, the company chooses for those for you as well. So there's three levels of a tech stack. So then we think about, okay, what's going to happen over time as these tools get better and we move on, let's say over the next 10 years. So this was a model that has been proposed by OpenAI, and most people, I think, just accept it as that's roughly what it looks like. So the first phase was chatbots. So most things that people would think of as ChatGPT would be a chatbot. So it came out in November 2022. That's when everybody started using it. And everything until recently has been a chatbot. You type a message and you get a message back. So that was kind of phase one. Phase two is what we're in right now, which is the reasoning models. So the AI can actually start to do expert level reasoning. And this has a lot of implications for managers who, one example I like to give is reasoning AI. We like to push the limits of what these tools can do, and we created a planning function for like a strategic plan. And it would take pre-AI, it would take weeks to do a strategic plan, and you've got experts and all that kind of stuff. Then with chatbots, you could do it in it'd take hours, but you could still string together a lot of prompts that would help you do a strategic plan. Now that the reasoning AI is here, you can do it in minutes. And so there's these implications for what reasoning AI can do. And it's taken 2 years for most people to figure out what can a chatbot do. And it's going to take equally a long time for people to unpack what can these reasoning tools do. Then the next stage will be agents. So that's still, for the most part, even though Anthropic released a kind of agent preview last week and everybody kind of went nuts over it because that's what the internet does. Even they said this is going to be a couple of years before this is operational, everybody can use it. So, but it's coming. So if you think about it, chatbots were you had to message things and it was seconds message, you read it, you interact with it. So it's really this second by second dance you're playing with chatbots. Reasoning AI can do a lot of more. It starts to think for a little bit and it does longer period tasks. And these agents are going to spend even more time because they're going to be able to go execute the tasks that the reasoning AI came up with. So over time, the good news, bad news is it starts to do more of your job without you having to interrupt or look at the output. So that's from a functional point of view, what will happen. And so over time, your individual tech stack will probably change. So the example would be most of the marketing tools that launched in the first wave have been wiped out. You don't need a copywriting tool anymore. You can use ChatGPT and it does as good of a job as the first marketing tools that were created. Similarly for agents, there's a whole bunch of software platforms that are stringing together things that are now agent-like, those are going to get wiped out. And not everybody, but most of them will get wiped out. And then it keeps going like that. So it'll be this long iterative process of you continually changing out you'll always have a base model LLM. You'll be changing out your workflow tools, and the rest of the tools you use will always get better and better at
A
doing
lot
your.
of adaption. And so when you look at, okay, when we look at where we are today, the LLM plus, I'll call it job specific things that sit on top of it, right? Um, how long are we going to be living in this world, do you suspect, until the agents come on and now we're retooling again? Is that 5 years? 2 years?
Yeah, it really depends. It's usually longer than the companies building the LLMs would tell you. Although, like some
Fair.
people are saying it's going to be this year. Some people would tell you it's going to be, a few years, maybe more. So
Mhm.
we really don't know day by day, week by week, month by month what's going to happen,
Okay.
but we can kind of
Fair enough.
see what will happen over a 10-year period.
Yeah.
And the reality, I think, from a real practical point of view, the message is these AI tools can already do way more of your job than you think. And if you got on it now, you would create this competitive advantage from a career
Mhm.
perspective, because you're just going to be way more productive already. Like even if they stopped all development today, like we've not even scratched the surface from like a society point of view of what these tools can do. And
Yeah.
so um, if you wait until agents come, that is a mistake. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And also I would imagine, and you know more about the technology than I do, but you're investing time training, whatever that base LLM that you've chosen, say you're on Claude, whatever it is, you're investing time training it on your brand, training it on your voice, training it on all these things that then as new tech comes along, new point solutions, the agents, whatever, you're starting from a different place. Is that accurate?
I think you have to be more specific with the question. I'm not sure I understand.
I guess what I'm saying is if you're training your LLM on your brand, on your IP, you're loading all of this into your LLM to know your company and what you do, and then to take, your reasoning off of it, you're taking actions off of it, you're doing all this stuff. And so then when agents come aboard, it's just additive to this rather than, okay, now I'm starting over and I'm going to build all that from scratch.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right way to think of it. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a couple of things in what you said. I think number one is you're not actually. I think you could think about it as training the AI, but you're not really training the AI on all those things. You could spend a weekend pulling together a bunch of data, and you could throw it in, and it will know everything about you. So it's not like a big task to pull together all of the things to get the AI to be helpful to you in your specific circumstances. Like when you're using ChatGPT as an example, the previous version, they created this little thing called custom instructions, which you would in theory fill with all the information about yourself and your brand and all those things you just mentioned, but most people just
Mm-hmm.
never did it. And so what they started to do is, as you're chatting with the tool, it'll start to learn from you and put it in those memories, they call it. And now the thing that I've learned is that it is way more helpful. The more information you give it and the more context you give it, it becomes like insanely helpful.
Yes.
Because
I
you don't.
think we're saying the same thing there, right? Why wouldn't you feed it more to become more helpful, more accurate?
Yeah, I think but it's not hard. It's like it's really easy to do. So like most people think of it as like, oh, I got to train an AI. It's like no, you just have to message with it, and like eventually it'll learn all the things that you're doing and how you want to do them.
Gotcha.
So, but then to your point, like yeah, nothing like those tools. It'd be hard to make a blanket statement to say like you won't have to start from scratch because we don't know. The old one models for OpenAI, which are currently, as of recording, is the only reasoning models. They're not the same as uh, the chatbot AI, and there's a learning curve to use them. And actually, right now, you can't use your memories to use the reasoning AI. I'm sure that will be different, by the time people are watching this. But so
Interesting.
like certainly the more context you give it, the better, and that'll always be true. And then as these new tools come out, you just need to learn how to use them. But if you think about it in a structured way, you will always be able to go explore. And that's kind of the hardest part, is how do I go explore making these tools more valuable for me in my role as I do it day by day. That's kind of the trick.
Yeah, and I guess I'm sitting here imagining the application where you want this output to be as accurate as possible, also, but also personalized to who you are as a company and who your products are, and all of this in this, say, the next 2 to 5 year period. And for example, you have product manuals and knowledge bases and all this stuff to support a product. I think support's such an easy thing to talk about, right? And that may or may not all exist online. So by entering that into an LLM and having that information available, now you can act upon it. So that was one way in which I was imagining that training going. But of course, there's the branding side as well, which is sort of the same thing. We want to be able to train it the right way, load the right information in where we're not acting upon, I don't know, something that somebody said about my brand on Reddit, for instance, that happens to be in the data set. Fair?
Yeah, the way I would think about it from like a marketing agency perspective is like it's no different than giving your creative directors a brief. It's like, here's what I want to accomplish. Here's the information you need in order to do your job well. So you wouldn't think of it in any different terms than that. And whatever would be helpful to a creative director is going to be helpful to the LLM. So like you wouldn't, your creative director, I hope, was not going to go look at comments on Reddit and use that as the basis for creating work for your client. So, or at least not base the entirety of the work on it. So if you just view it from, we're still doing the same work, but we're going to do it faster and easier, and all the other things that come along with the work remain true, then it becomes clear. It's like, okay, it's just this tool to compress time. And the more we think of it in that way, the easier it'll be.
Okay. Well, let's see, two questions. So one, all this is changing so quickly. What are some information sources that you suggest people go follow, whether that's podcasts or email newsletters or, AI itself? Like, how do you suggest people keep up and maybe specific to their roles and career?
So I think there's a couple of things. Number one is use the AI as much as humanly possible. Consider it your source of learning, no matter what it is you're doing, and adopt what we would call an AI first mindset. No matter what you're doing, the first question should be, how can AI help me do this faster and easier? And if nothing comes to mind, you go to the AI and you say, here's what I'm doing. What can you do to help me do this faster and easier? And that'll send you down a path of learning how to use the AI more productively, better than reading any other sources of. The thing I would suggest you don't do, maybe more importantly than what you do, is don't go subscribe to all the newsletters that talk about tools. Those are not the things that you need to get good at. The things you need to get good at is using the base model LLMs to the largest possible extent. And the only way you can do that is by doing it. So again, that's number one, is use the AI as much as humanly possible, and only step away from it when it's clear that you can't accomplish whatever it is you're trying to do with the base model LLM. Number two, I would subscribe to, I'd find one or two or three sources of people that will help you think about how to use AI. So I don't do a ton of, like, I've spent almost all of my time just trying to learn how to use the tools and make them productive for me and for the consultants that we work with and the clients that they work with. But there's a couple of people that I would trust to give me new ways to think about it. One of them, his name is Ethan Mollick. I would suggest, he's probably the only other AI voice that I would go and pay attention to. And mostly I even have to, because everybody in our community just says, oh, Ethan Mollick posted a new post. So it always just comes to me anyways.
Yeah.
But for the most part, he is very helpful in helping people understand what he calls the jagged edge or the frontier. And that's really I think his most useful idea of like, but if you pay attention to him, all you're going to conclude is that you should go back and start doing these things yourself. And you should be hunting for the jagged frontier of where AI can be useful for you and where it's not. So I think maybe that's kind of like the best advice I can give, because he'll just point you back to.
Yeah. Get your hands dirty.
Yeah, that's it. You don't learn how to ride a bike in a seminar. I think, as somebody once said, you need to just get out there and ride the bike.
Well, and I like what you said about asking the LLM for advice and having that dialogue, because I'm realizing, as we've now had 34 minutes into this conversation, that, you have linear or maybe dated views of what's effective and what's not, that's based on, my experience from a few months ago. Playing with the LLM, that is probably completely different playing with it now. And so all of this stuff is changing rapidly. And so check the assumptions at the door and keep trying things, because it's going to keep changing, is what I heard you say too.
Yeah, absolutely. In between those 5 stages that are going to happen, the models get progressively better even within the stage, even though they don't make a big deal of it. It just gets better and better and better at doing things. So if you concluded 2 months ago that it wasn't useful for something, first of all, I would want to check how you did the interaction, because even several months ago, like it will do any job very, very well, but it's gotten a lot better in the interim. So the biggest mistake I think people will make is assuming that it's not possible to provide, that the AI is going to provide you value. I think the question is not if, but how. And if you find that it's not helpful, assume the problem is you, not the LLM, and that you need to just dig in a little bit more, and eventually you'll find your way.
This sounds like the attorney in you. Just keep digging, dig and analyze. And
No, it's true though. That's what I found, is like most people will, if you come in with the mindset that this is not going to be helpful, you'll prove yourself right. And if you come in with the mindset that this will be helpful, you will prove yourself right. And so I think it's the mindset of, not if, but how.
Okay. Well, where can people connect with you and learn more about your organization?
simpleacademy.ai. And we'd love to see you there.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Steve.
It's been great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our e-newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.